Chapter 3, Farm Gates. Martin and Nadine did the dishes in silence, though Nadine kept thinking of something to say to her brother. Just then the dogs began barking and howling. Martin froze, his eyes fixed on what was happening outside. Nadine followed her brother's gaze and watched as Ted backed his truck out of the shed. She could just make out Daniel sitting, pale-faced, in the front seat. After the truck had driven past the house on its way up the long driveway to the main road, Martin stormed off to his bedroom. Nadine sighed. Boys and their hormones, and there was just too much to do around here. As she put a clean tablecloth on the table, she became aware that the dogs were still barking. Well, not the dogs, just one dog, hers. She went out to the laundry with the dirty tablecloth and found her mother feeding clothes through the old Ringer washing machine. "Can I take Hawkeye for a walk?" "Have you done all your chores?" "Yes." "Pig bucket?" Nadine's shoulders drooped. "I'll do it now," she said, and went back outside. Nadine took the pig bucket out to the 44-gallon drum Ted had put on the trailer and emptied the scraps into it. Even with the cold weather, the fruit flies still swarmed out, flying around her head and sticking to her sleeves and hair. She brushed her arms and shook her head vigorously as she walked quickly away, and it was only when she got to the outside tap near the laundry door did she begin to breathe again. Fruit flies, she'd learned not long after moving to the farm, happily fly up your nose or into your mouth. Of all the chores she had to do, this one was the worst. And while she scrubbed the bucket, she went through the list of chores she had to do on a Saturday. Make bed, check. Dirty clothes out, check. Dishes, check. Scraps, check. Good. All chores done. Now she was free to do what she wanted, and what she wanted was to take Hawkeye for a run. She went back to her mother. "Finished now," she declared. "Can I go?" Marion frowned, her hands automatically working the machine and the sloppy wet clothes. "I guess it's fine. Ted won't be back for a while." She lifted the flattened washing out of the tub and put them into a cane basket. "Be back by lunchtime, please." "Thanks, Ma," Nadine said as she walked inside, humming to herself, and grabbed her thick bush jacket, hat and scarf before she put on her gumboots. She hesitated. Perhaps she should ask Martin if he wanted to come too. Nah, walking the farm wasn't his kind of thing. It was very cold even in the sun, and the frost crunched under her feet. Around the dog kennels the mud had frozen in the shapes left by the dogs' prints. Around the dog kennels the mud had frozen in the shapes left by the dogs' prints. And still it stunk. Perhaps this afternoon she would clean out the runs. Hawkeye jumped and twisted on his chain, eager to touch and smell her. "Sit," Nadine ordered, and for a moment the dog was still enough for her to unclip the chain. Before it had even dropped to the ground, Hawkeye leapt away and galloped over the paddock, down to the blackberries, through the fence, and further down to the creek. She didn't hurry after him. She didn't need to, because she knew he'd be back soon with something in his mouth, or stuck to his tail, or wrapped around his head. And, as always, she would fuss and growl at him while he stood patiently as she untangled him from the foreign object. Today was no different. Nadine had only just passed into the bush when Hawkeye came snuffling and growling toward her from somewhere deep in the trees. She could just see him, and saw also that he had something large in his mouth, something pale and hard. By the time he was only a few metres away, she could see that it was a skull. Probably from a cow, Nadine thought as she moved toward her dog. But though she had only lived here a short time, she knew that it was not the bone of a cow. It was the skull of something much smaller. "Give it," Nadine commanded, and proceeded to unclench Hawkeye's jaws from around his spine. Finally, slippery and dirty, Nadine held it in her hands. It was long and pointed, and had pointed teeth. She shivered. It looked like a dog. Something about that realization made her feel weird. Now she didn't want to be in here. And she turned around, heading back out into the sunlight, still with the skull in her hand. She'd asked Martin what it was. He was really into skeletons and stuff, and his room was full of papers and books and drawings. It probably wasn't anything important, although she had heard a kid at school saying they'd found more bones down in a swamp by the quarry. Maybe it wasn't a dog after all. Maybe it was some prehistoric animal. Maybe she had discovered something new. Her mind began to drift again, drift to her name in the paper, perhaps a television news item, perhaps some money. Maybe she'd even get to go overseas to speak about her find. Away from the farm, away from this life, away from him. She stopped suddenly. She had gone through one of the farm gates without even remembering. She went back to the post and stood beside the gate thinking. It was open, but was it supposed to be? She couldn't remember. And if she got it wrong, she would be in trouble. But if she closed it, perhaps the cattle wouldn't be able to get out to some water. Her stepfather had a complicated system of gates and paddocks, and Nadine struggled to keep track of them. Hawkeye was rolling in some manure and having a great time. Still undecided, Nadine closed the gate, but didn't latch it. That way, if it was supposed to be open, she could say that it must have blown closed. If it was supposed to be shut, then it looked shut. She strode on, past her disgustingly filthy dog, and headed back to the house, the skull under her arm. A moment later, Hawkeye came bounding past her, his coat a sticky, matted green.